Welcome to the Solo Grind, where we shine a light on the raw and real journey of being a solo entrepreneur. I am Teresa, your guide on this adventure of going it alone without a safety net and without the rule book. The grind is real, my friend, and so are the wins, the freedom, and the joy of building success on your own terms. I'm here to debunk the myths, share some laughs, and share what it takes to thrive as a go-getter, busy, doing it all entrepreneur. We have all heard about the power of the pivot, but what exactly does that look like and what does it mean? In this episode, with my very first guest, my best friend Crystal Nerpel, we are going to be talking about what a pivot looks like and how incredibly transformational it can be for your life and your business as you head on this journey of a solo grind. Hello and welcome to the Solo Grind. I am so excited to introduce my very first guest ever. And you guys are going to be a little bit familiar with her because I probably mention her in just about every episode. This is my best friend, Crystal. Crystal is a retired professional organizer, a former grade school teacher, and an aspiring author, which I would say is an author, actually. She's working on publishing her first book, but more about that in a second. Crystal has been married to her husband, Rob, for almost 29 years. And I was actually there the night that they met. Crystal has even said if it wasn't for me, I wouldn't have met the love of, or she wouldn't have met the love of her life, sorry, because I was her ride to the party where we met Rob. We have been best friends since the third grade, so I have known her in every single stage of life. She is currently enjoying the soft life where she spends time loving her home, enjoying her family, and writing. She will be publishing her first book in the coming year. I have faith in that. And her debut book is entitled Loving Your Home, Clean Up Your Focus, Not Your House. Crystal, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, my friend. I am so honored to be your first guest.
It feels kind of fitting and kind of perfect that you are my first guest because you have been there by my side, whether, just emotionally, because we live so far apart, which is crazy that we've had this friendship for all these years when we've not lived by each other in more years than I want to count.
Like 40
Um,
years.
yeah, yeah, but you have
Yeah.
always been there through every major part of my life. You've been there by my side, cheering me on, and it just seems fitting that you were my very first guest. So thank you so much for coming.
Yes, it's an honor, honestly. I am so excited for this. You have so much knowledge. It just makes so much sense that you're doing a podcast. I think most of the things that I've learned in life, aside from what my parents have taught me, I've learned from you. So
Oh,
and I can't wait for your audience to learn from you. This is like such a privilege to be here.
thank you so much. All right, so today what we're going to talk about is the power of the pivot or the permission to pivot. I'm not really sure what we're going to title this podcast now that we're recording, but it definitely is talking about the pivot. And in my mind, nobody understands the need to pivot or understands what a pivot is better than Crystal. She's helped me make a lot of pivots in my life. And so to start off with, I thought, we could talk a little bit about what pivot means because we hear that all the time out there in the world. We'll pivot, you need to pivot, you need to shift or change. But what does that actually mean? And when we were preparing for this podcast, I realized that we had similar but very different definitions at the same time. For me, a pivot is when it's time to make a really big shift in a new direction that I didn't expect. It's my next best step, but it's a step that I did not anticipate or expect I was going to want or need to take, or that was even going to become an opportunity. Tell us what pivot is for you.
Which is very similar. But it's just to me the next logical step, or as you said, the next best step, even if it wasn't planned. Even though I consider myself a planner and all those personality tests like confirm that I am a planner, I like to have a little bit of control. But when things shift and they don't feel right, it just makes sense. Like to me, a pivot makes sense. To a lot of people, a pivot is like, whoa, I didn't see that coming, which usually
Yeah.
you don't see it coming. You don't plan for things, but I'm a go with the flow kind of person. So I'm like, well, of course. Okay, so what's next? what's next? This is next. It just to me is the natural progression of how things are supposed to go, even though we didn't plan for it. And so I usually just go with it. I am not very scared of change. I think change is good. We have to change. We are like these energetic beings that energy needs to flow and move, and we are energy. So we have to move and flow. We can't stay stuck. So to me, it's just very logical that we pivot constantly. And if you stay stuck, I love contentment. I love to be
You do.
content. I do. So, and just loving my life, but that doesn't always mean that I stay where I am all the time. So, pivoting is part of contentment for me too. I'm like, ooh, that feels good. So it's got to feel good. So actually, sometimes it feels horrible to pivot, doesn't it? It's very scary too. So I
It is
say
very scary to
positive
go in a
that.
whole new direction and to have to face the naysayers and the doubters and the people who think you're losing your mind going in this whole brand new direction. It's terrifying. Yeah, absolutely.
Because you feel judged by other people.
Yeah.
So I also feel, you feel like a failure sometimes too. So when I was a teacher, this is like how I think I've always remembered this. When I was a teacher many years ago, and this other teacher was about to retire in the next few years. And she said, when I retire, I'm just going to pick up my purse and walk out the door. She's like, I'm not taking anything with me, including regrets, nothing. Everything is staying behind. I'm just picking up my purse and I'm walking out the door. And I'm be, happy that I did it, happy that I had this job, and happy that I'm moving on to something else. And so that's what a pivot feels like to me. It's like I'm picking up my purse and I'm going. So no regrets. I'm not bringing anybody's judgments along with me because people do judge you. You're like, God, what a flake. So let's talk about your influence on how I pivot too, and that speech that you did many years ago.
Okay.
And I don't know if there's any recordings out there of it anymore, but that was the best thing I've ever heard on career changes because that's usually where you see the pivots or what we're because most of your audience is probably are probably going to be entrepreneurs and
Mhm. Yep.
they're going to face some pivoting and they're going to get judgments from people because they're quitting their job maybe and they're doing something on their own. And some people may look at them as flaky. Or so, can we talk?
Yeah.
Tell me about your speech. Tell us about your speech because I thought it was very powerful because I think a lot of people feel the way that you felt and you're like, screw it.
Yeah, I'll have to look. I know my plan had been to have a recording of it, and the person who was recording for me that night got afraid to record. It was very weird. So instead of just recording like I asked, she was like trying to record from underneath a table. So the video was all distorted, the audio was jacked up, but all it's all good. Again, fear gets in the way. But it was one of the best speeches I think I've ever given. So kind of go back to that night. I was addressing a group of women entrepreneurs and talking about being an entrepreneur, and it's a very different world. It's a very different mindset. We see the world very differently. Whereas, like my husband, he's not an entrepreneur. He's incredibly successful, he's incredibly intelligent, but he's had a set career path. He was going to do the military till he retired, and then he was going to work in the farming industry here in his hometown. And farming wasn't what he picked originally, but he knew he was going to work in his hometown, and that's what's available. And so he's very set on his path, and he did that. Whereas with an entrepreneur, we're always like, "Ooh, what's over there? Or what's over here? Or what is this?" And I just always had that spirit. And so in this speech, I was talking about how I've had many careers in my lifetime. I mean, I've helped develop and organize multiple businesses and organizations. I was in the military. I went into administrative work for a while. I was in the broadcasting world with digital technology for courses and stuff, doing online courses before it was a thing, before people would do this all the time. Um, and I've kind of been all over the place, and I never hesitated to just be like, okay, I'm going to do this. And a good example was when I left the corporate world like 13, 14 years ago. I kind of did that. I picked up my purse and I left and I said, goodbye. I am now a certified life coach and I'm going to be a life coach. So here I had been in the world of technology and technical support and things like that and had built a support desk. And I picked up my purse and the next day I was a life coach. Completely different thing. And
Hmm.
everyone thought I was crazy. My parents have called me flaky. My sister was like, "Oh my God, Terry, you just don't understand. You need to stick with a job, you know?" I mean, like, I hear it so much. My husband is, I think he has thought many things about it, but I also want to put out there my husband, while he thinks I'm crazy half the time, he has always been supportive and is like, if that's what you feel like you have to do, then you should do it. But I know it was difficult for him too at times because I kept changing direction. And I make jokes like, maybe this will be my next career. And he just rolls his eyes now. But the thing of it was, is that even though it seemed absolutely crazy, and even though I didn't stay in that life coaching world, I did it for 5 years and it was incredible. It was my next best step because when I went back to technology and became a web designer, I bring a level of support that most web designers cannot produce. And that is that live coaching piece. That is that support piece, the encouragement piece, because launching a website is incredibly vulnerable. And so for me, it was a natural career or what's the word I'm looking for? Whatever, transformation. It was just natural for me to do it. And that's kind of what it was all about. And I've seen you do the same in your
Mhm.
own life. So tell me, I want to hear a little bit about yours, or I want my audience to hear about yours because I know all about it. But
Well, I've had a lot of pivots too, and life coaching was part of mine. Now, let's point out too. I want everyone to know you were a life coach before anybody else was a life coach, or any. Now you throw a stone and you hit a life coach. So
yeah,
I don't even know what a life coach was when you became one. I'm like, what the hell is that? What do you
most
mean?
people were like, what the hell is that?
Yeah, so
Yeah.
of course it was, I can imagine the people in your life are like, what are you doing? What are
Hmm.
you doing? So one of the pivots that I had, first of all, was becoming a professional organizer. That was never in the plan. I just needed to, so I guess that was a huge pivot. Becoming an entrepreneur was never in the plan because I don't consider myself like an entrepreneurial spirit. Whereas I always look at my husband and I'm like, he's got so many ideas and such a go-getter. Like he would be the one to start the business. But I did. I started my business because I needed to do it out of necessity for my own personal life. And I became organized. So anyway, so then I became professional organizer and I made another pivot, which was an influence of you. I'm like, I'm going to get my life coaching certificate as well. And I didn't want to be a life coach. Just after talking to you, I'm like, I don't think that's what I want to do, but I know I need this knowledge. So taking those courses and getting certified in life coaching was a huge pivot. And it did make me a much better professional organizer. And unexpectedly, it made me a better wife and mother too, and friend, because it teaches you how to listen when you become a life coach. You realize that it's not your job to fix people's problems. And that was like mind blowing to me. I'm embarrassed to say, I thought it was my job to fix everybody's problems. I got to fix everyone's clutter. I got to fix everything in the home. Guess what? It's not my problem. So that was a very positive little pivot there was becoming a certified life coach. And there's multiple things. I also want to bring up my broken ankle
Yes,
because I
such a
was
great story.
in nearly 3 years ago. I can't believe it. 3 years ago, I signed up for my very first marathon, full marathon. And our friend Darla was coming along for the ride with me. So we were training together, and I was 49. I was going to be 49 when we ran the race. And I wasn't training the way that I wanted to. I wasn't running the race that I wanted to, not to get into too many details, but it wasn't in line with what my soul wanted originally. And I knew that, but I was like, let's just push through, let's just do it. So one day we were running late at night. I really wanted to run in the morning, but I was waiting for Darla. So we ran at night. And I fell and broke my ankle. And I was devastated.
I was devastated.
But I mean, and I think I think physical injuries just really like mess with your head anyway. So I
Yes.
had wasted money because I had spent a lot of money on a nutritionist, just products for running, learning how to do this, my time, registering for the race. And then I was letting Darla down because I couldn't run anymore.
Yeah.
So she wasn't going to run. She's like, well, I'm not going then. So then I just felt like I let everybody down. Anyway, that's a whole different story. But that, was a pivot I had to make. And I think that I was forced into that pivot of releasing expectations of how my original vision of running a race. So you can still have the vision, but things may shift up on you. And it may not sound like a pivot. It may like sound like somebody just like, I don't know, there's a big roadblock and I broke my ankle. But it was a pivot because I had to rethink on how I was going to train. I trained complete. I went ahead and I'm like, I'm still doing this. I trained completely differently and my mindset was completely different. I did it 100% on my own. And this time I had no blisters like I did before. I had no black toenails like I had before. I had zero chafing. I had no back pain. And before I was having all of that because I wasn't doing it the way I knew
Yeah.
there was resistance there. So anyway, so that was a big pivot for me. And I ended up crossing the finish line on my 50th birthday, which is exactly how I envisioned doing it, even though I signed up for doing something else originally. So I don't know if that sounds like a pivot, but for me, it was absolutely like a pivot of how I was thinking and approaching my race. So
Yeah.
I ended up running the kind of race that I wanted to run. It was
Mhm.
it was amazing. So letting go of your expectations is huge too. And not knowing how things are going to end up or not knowing how it's going to happen. Maybe it's going to end up exactly the way you think, but
Mhm.
not in the way that you think it's going to happen.
Yeah.
That's huge. Expectations put limitations on where
Absolutely.
you go.
Absolutely. And let's talk a little bit about that resistance because I think that's a big part of that. When we know we need to pivot, there's resistance. And there's a lot of reasons why we resist, and I think in your notes, like you shared quite a few of those, but like letting go of control or the feeling embarrassed and what are other people going to think or what is that? Talk a little bit more about that because I love your
Sure.
perspective on the resistance aspect to pivoting and change.
So when you're faced with a big change that deep in your soul, you're like, something's got to change, and you don't want to make that change. Why do you have resistance to change? It always comes down to fear. So I want to talk about the control reason is I didn't realize. So let's talk about Darla again. Darla's taught me a lot in my life too. So she works for Brain Balance. So she works a lot with
Yeah.
kiddos and like kids who have anxiety. And a lot of people, children and grown-ups, have anxiety. And that's why they want to hold on to control because if things don't go exactly as planned, they're really worried about what's going to happen in the end.
Mhm.
So, and Rob, my husband, he said that's why I need to have control is because I'm worried that things won't turn out the way that they will turn out. And I'm like, that is to me, very good self-awareness on his part. Is like he knows why he's a control freak. And you know, he's a
Yeah.
very nice man. So control, like
It's a very
even
nice man.
even my mother-in-law, he's like, I think my mom is a bit of a control freak as well because she's always anxious and worried that she can't control the weather. So she's
Right.
always worried about the weather because it's something she can't control. So if there are things you can't control in your life, you worry about them. And I don't know how to tell you how to release that control or how to release that worry and that fear, but that is one reason you're resisting the change is because you're worried it's not going to turn out the way you think it's going to. And then the other thing too, I think, is just the judgment of others. You're worried that people are going to judge you.
Mhm.
And again, I don't know how to tell you how to release the worry of that and not give a flip about what other people think because I just naturally don't. But those are the two things that I see, and the people that I love around me who have issues pivoting. And when I have issues pivoting as well, too, like quitting a job. I had a job once that just was not settling well with me. I was there for 2 years. And I know it wasn't settling well with me because, I would hear behind the scene things that kind of like, oh, kind of made me question why I was in this place. And then I had back seizures. You've introduced me to Louise Hay. So I
Yep.
know that when something's going on in my body, there's something going on in my mind. So it just made sense that I was having work issues because it was my lower back and it wasn't about money, but it was about my work. And I knew I eventually had to just make a pivot and let that go. And it made me sad. So that's another one too. I was sad to let that thing go. But when I let it go, I pivoted. And that's when I opened up my own business and I became my own boss. And I'm like, this is so much better. So you level up. When you pivot, you level up, even when you have
So
resistance.
much better. And I will say too, one of the things that I think keeps us from pivoting is like investing time and money into something. So I invested a lot of time and money into becoming a certified life coach, and I was also a certified hypnotherapist. There was a lot of time, effort, money, everything invested in that career path, and I only did it for 5 years. I mean, my husband barely paid off the student loans, and we barely paid off our student loans, and I was like, I'm going to change careers again. And that one was a hit for him. He was like, are you kidding me? We just paid all this money, and he was happy to support me and to help contribute to my education, and I contributed to it, so it was all that. But we just paid all this money, and now I'm not going to use it in his mind, and that's what it is. And I think we get stuck because we've invested this time and money and effort into this one path, so we have to see it through. If we just keep going, we'll get to the dream we want, and we have that illusion that, oh, right around the corner is what we're looking for. But deep in our soul, and I believe what you're saying, deep in our soul, we know there's that feeling that we know deep down this isn't right. No matter what we thought was the right path, we had to go down this road for some reason, but now it's time to look for the new road that is going to take us to what we really want. And I think that holds a lot of us back, and it is fear that keeps us stuck. And fear of judgment is a big piece of that
Mhm.
also. So, yeah.
Absolutely. That resonates so much with me because I was a teacher for 3 years before decided that's enough. I retire. Who retires after 3 years? I do. I do because I wanted to be a stay-at-home mom. So I pivoted it again. And yeah, so that was one of my pivots as well. And I didn't even think about the time and money you invest in feeling like a loser and wasting all that money, wasting all that time. It's not freaking wasted.
No.
Being a teacher for me absolutely made me a better mother
Yeah.
and vice versa. But it was just the next step. And then being a stay-at-home mom led me to having a little part-time job I didn't love and I quit. And then that led me to being a professional organizer. And then that led me to opening up my club. And then that led me to writing a book. Just one thing leads to another. It's the way it's
Absolutely. And I want to talk about that piece of failure here just for a minute, because when I did step away from life coaching, so I did it for 5 years. And at the end of 5 years, I was actually presenting at a women's group one night. And it was kind of a vulnerable moment. We were talking about more deep, vulnerable things. And I was sobbing as a presenter because all this truth was just coming through me all of a sudden. I realized I absolutely did not like being a life coach. Like, I love the industry, and it's so powerful when it's done really well, because there's some hacks out there, but there's some really amazing people in the life coaching industry, and it's amazing industry. But I did not want to do it, and I knew I couldn't do it anymore. No matter what I had invested, I had to turn. And so as I pivoted, in fact, being a web designer was kind of an accident, because I was like, I have no idea what's next, but I have people who need websites, and I'm willing to do it for cheap and to make some money to get me through the summer. And then I'll figure out what my next step is going to be. And then I fell into being, a really good web designer and loving this career path. But when I made that pivot, I had so much criticism around me. Like I said, even my husband, that was hard for him. He was very supportive, but that one was hard for him to swallow because of the money we'd invested in becoming a life coach. But
Mhm.
even other people in my life are like, okay, are you going to give up this crazy idea now and get a real job? When are you going to let this go? I mean, like, there was really hardcore criticism coming at me, and
Mhm.
it's hard to face that sometimes. It really is hard to face it. And like Crystal said, you've got to figure out what it is for you. But I just had to learn to trust my own feelings, my own instincts. And I also stopped sharing my plans, honestly, of what was next with a lot of people. Not that I didn't love them, but I didn't want to tell them what I was going to do. I wanted to show them what was next for me. I wanted to show them that it was the right step by doing it. So I stopped sharing a
Ooh,
lot of
that's
it.
big. I think
Yeah.
that's a really great tip. Only share with the people that you know are going to support you. And sometimes that's not always the people that are closest to you. Sometimes the people that are closest to you are your biggest critics because they're so intertwined with your life and they have expectations of how your life is supposed to go.
Mhm,
if
they
that makes
do.
sense. So when you do something different and you pivot in a different direction, it freaks them out. It freaks them out.
It does freak them out. Yeah. And they may, and I want to point this out too, they may never actually understand. My 86-year-old daddy, he's so sweet. He told me a couple years ago when he was here visiting that he's so glad that I have a husband to support me because he can't
So that's nice.
understand that my little home office actually is a thriving, LLC corporation. Like he can't understand that I'm making money here because it just doesn't make sense in his brain. And that's okay. Like
Yeah.
he means well, and you have to also sometimes just take things with a grain of salt and recognize that they just can't understand where you're at, and that's okay.
It is okay. Absolutely. That's a good message to put out there too. And just show those people grace. It's okay that they don't share the same vision with you. And nobody ever is going to share your vision.
Mhm.
You're going to be excited for the people that you love. So let me just like say my husband comes to me with a business opportunity or a business idea. He's got a million of them. And he comes,
I love
super
it.
excited. I am never going to be as excited about it as he is.
Right.
And I don't judge myself for that. And hopefully he doesn't judge me, but it's just how it is. Like when I tell everybody in my family for I had to like get, I had to get myself going on writing this book. So in order to do that, I texted my family, I am writing a book and I sent it off. And I was actually, after I sent it, I'm like, yes, I'm so excited about it. And they just said, okay. They weren't nearly as enthusiastic as I was. And when I signed up for the marathon, I'm like, I signed up for a marathon. Rob was actually a little resentful because I hadn't told him ahead of time. So nobody's ever going to be excited about what you're doing as you are, and they may criticize you. And you're just going to have to be
Yeah.
prepared for that.
Yeah, absolutely. And just learn that they're coming from a good place. They mean well, but you still have to trust your own instincts, I think. So,
Absolutely.
okay.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, on that topic of pivot, you came up with some funsy facts that I really do want to share with this. And then I want you to tell us more about your book that is going to be coming out soon. But first, tell us about these funsy facts of some businesses that had to pivot, because you came up with three great examples that I think are worth sharing here.
Yes, these are three of my favorites. So now listen, so just keep this in mind whenever you are doing something in your business is not working out the way that you think it's going to work out. It doesn't mean you have to change your vision. It just means that you may need to pivot within your business. So let's start with YouTube. I didn't realize this, but YouTube originally started out as a dating site, which I think is hilarious. I don't know why. Just because I'm old school, I've never been on a dating site before. I know that's a thing now, but I've never
Yeah.
swiped.
Yeah, and
Um,
I'd never heard that, and it's hilarious. I love it.
yeah, so in 2005, I think it was actually on Teresa's 32nd birthday,
Yeah,
YouTube was launched. So it was a big day.
it was a big day.
Yeah, so I think it was three friends, and what the deal was, you were supposed to upload videos of you, just like, hey, I love long walks on the beach. I love pina coladas, whatever. And
Yeah,
then you're supposed to connect with somebody else who had a video out there, maybe, or saw your video and like, hey, you want to get together? And nobody uploaded videos. The research suggests that people who need to find people and are shy anyway are not going to upload videos of
no,
themselves talking about themselves. So it
right.
just didn't work. It fell flat. So I think 3 or 4 months later, they're like, well, let's take the dating aspect of it out, and it exploded.
Yeah,
And so people just uploaded videos of their dogs or whatever. And as we know, YouTube is large. So that worked out for them. So they pivoted. The other one was Shopify, which I thought was interesting.
mhm,
So Shopify actually started out with a couple friends who wanted to sell some snowboarding gear because they were snowboarding enthusiasts. So they created a website, they're trying to sell gear, and they're like, this sucks. This e-commerce stuff is clunky, it doesn't work right. So then they went in, one of them was a programmer. So he went in and created a program, an e-commerce program out of, and it worked great. And then they were selling things very easily. And then they realized, you know what? Our success is going to be selling this product, our e-commerce product, my program, to other companies who want to
yeah.
sell things, and the rest is history. They don't have a snowboarding. I don't think, I didn't look it up, but I don't think they do snowboarding anymore. It's just all
It's probably
Shopify.
their hobby now. Still, it is their hobby.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. And then my favorite for some reason, because Avon has been around forever. And
Mhm.
my mom never sold Avon, but you just think of like the iconic, I think 1950s, I don't know,
Yep.
knocking on the door. Avon calling. Well, originally it was one dude, one guy named David H. McConnell, and he was just a door-to-door book salesman. And in order to get the housewives who were home when he was visiting homes selling books to get them to buy the books, he would offer free perfume as a consolation gift. Well, the women bought his books just because they wanted the perfume. So he was smart enough to recognize, like, they're not buying my books, they're wanting the perfume. So he's like, hey, let's sell perfume. And so he pivoted and then he went into perfume and cosmetics, and that is how Avon was born. So pivoting, listening to your gut, and knowing what feels right, I mean, it's a good idea to pivot, is what I'm saying. You have to pivot
It is.
in order to like embrace what's ahead.
Mhm.
It's good to be content, but don't be stuck.
But don't be stuck. And I will say that was one thing when I transitioned, through my own career, being on my own and doing my own businesses. I had this idea that my dream was to be a life coach. My dream was to create life on my own terms. And I had to get deeper with my dream and I had to recognize that. My dream was to live life on my own terms, and having my own businesses allowed me to do that. Honestly, my businesses have been a tool in creating the life that I want. They have not been the dream, even though I absolutely love what I do and I love the path that I've been on. They are a tool that has gotten me to what I truly deeply desire, and that is to live life on my own terms. So,
I
yes.
love
All right.
that.
Yay. Okay. Well, Crystal, tell us about your book because I've been able to read some of it, of course. But I
Mhm.
want you to tell us a little bit about it because I want to build some excitement for when it publishes.
Sure. It is based off everything that I learned as a professional organizer, as a homeowner, and through the amazing women in my Loving Your Home Club, which that was a membership site, which no longer exists. I had to let that go so I could pivot and write the book and focus on that. But it's really about loving yourself. And I think the target audience would be any woman who thinks they need to have a perfect home, a perfect body, a perfect life, a perfect marriage, and to stop putting so much freaking pressure on yourself and to know that good enough is good enough. And so the book uses so what I do is I use my home as one gigantic vision board, and I use the energy and the rooms within my home to create my perfect life, because I think there is a correlation between what's going on in my home and what's going on in my life. So that's pretty much what it's about. It's about how I use my home as a tool, just like you use your business as a tool to create your best life. I use my home as a tool to create my best life. And I just share how I do that.
Yes. And I have to tell you guys, keep an eye out for this. I will definitely be announcing it as it comes out through one of my channels because I'm so proud of Crystal just as her best friend, but also it is such a transformational book. There's so many things that I have learned about creating my ideal life through Crystal and her expertise. And honestly, I would say in the last, probably 3 to 4 years, I finally have a home that I never need an escape from. It is my favorite place to be. I absolutely love it. I love to travel and I love to go see people and visit and see new places, but I can't wait to come home. And I don't ever really like taking extended trips because home is my sanctuary and it's my favorite place to be. And it's because of the things that I've learned from you, Crystal, that has helped me create that. So
Oh, that's such
thank
a
you
big
very much.
compliment. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Yes.
Very sweet. I love
Okay.
it.
Okay, good. All right. So, one last thing as we close up our podcast here today is just for fun. I wanted to ask you a question if you can give some insights because I think these are just kind of fun. If you could time travel to any year, past or future, where would you go and what would you do?
I would travel back in time to 1980 something, 1982, actually. I would talk to this little girl right here because I feel
Oh,
like this is who I'm holding up a picture of
I'm
myself
going to
as
share a copy of that picture with this
an eight.
podcast. Yeah.
Okay,
I
yes, as
love
like
that face.
an 8-year old. I was very insecure at that age, and I would love to go back and just give her a big hug and tell her that you're going to do some pretty freaking amazing things. Even though you're the last one in the PE class with a beet red face, at the end, when you're running loops around the gym, you're going to run 26.2 miles someday. And the rest of these MFers are not going to do that. So you're
That's true.
okay.
That's very true. I love it. Oh my God.
And you're gonna do all these amazing things. You're gonna have, I'm not gonna tell her everything because I want her to be surprised. But I
Yeah.
think I would like to go back and tell her, like, you're gonna be very impressed with yourself. You're gonna
I
be
love
fine.
that.
Yeah,
That
so
is
that's
so much better than my
what.
answer to this question.
Well, what about you? Where would you go?
I honestly, I would want to travel back and meet and hang out with Benjamin Franklin.
Oh,
Like,
he's
oh my, I
fascinating.
love his brain. I have such a nerd crush on old Benny Boy, and it's totally his brain because he was not like the hottest man out there
He's
for
not real
sure.
attractive.
No, but I his brain amazes me. And he was quite the socializer, the partier, the womanizer. Like he was out and really had a zest for life that a lot of people did not understand. But his brain, like there's so many things I think were not even tapped into to his brain that the world wasn't ready to understand. And I would love to just have
Mm.
long conversations over bourbon or Yingling beer or whatever. I don't know.
Oh, I think you guys would get along so well. I had
Mhm.
no idea he was like, see, I would have thought he would have been a little like awkward because he was so intelligent and maybe just was in his brain too much. But yeah, that sounds like your kind of person for sure.
I know, right?
Oh, that's
So
great.
yes,
That's a
if
great
time
answer.
travel ever comes, I'm going to go meet Benjamin Franklin and hang out with him.
I
I think it
love
would
it.
be awesome. So,
I love
okay.
it.
Well, Crystal, thank you so much for being my first guest and for this incredible conversation. I honestly cannot wait to share it with everybody.
It was so fun. I'm just so proud of you.
Aw, thank you so much. And my friends, that is it. That is the end of this episode of The Solo Grind. Be sure to tune in next week where we turn our focus to business matters and talk about metrics. And I am going to be sharing with you the number one metrics in my business that always keeps me focused, successful, productive, and profitable. Thanks for tuning in to the Solo Grind. I hope this episode brought you some inspiration and encouragement. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe, rate, and review the podcast, and feel free to share. For more tips and insights, visit caffeinecreative.io to check out my blog or explore the Creative Vault, my free course library. You can also find me on Facebook and Instagram. I'd love to hear how this episode has helped you.